Welcome back, everyone. Another toldinstone video. How did the Greeks and Romans build colossal temples? I've always wondered this myself because their architecture is quite astonishing. You have to have a certain level of mathematics and what do you call it? Geometry skills to be able to master the art of building these crazy big structures, as well as you got to find the place to get the stone, excavate it. Then you have to traverse it from wherever you got it. Then you have to use like craftsmen and artisans to craft the columns or the statues of the because a lot of these buildings had statues within the buildings itself, in the walls itself. A lot of carving, a lot of fun. So yeah, what is the process? How did it look like? Let's see what Toldstone has for us today. Make sure you hit that like button. I appreciate you guys. Let's go.
I am standing in Selinus, a Greek city in western Sicily, next to the ruins of one of the largest temples ever constructed. The temple was flattened by earthquakes centuries ago, but the remains are still awe-inspiring.
I love how they're they're almost perfect cylinders, but they're like bead-like. They're segmented.
The column drums scattered around me
are
10 feet thick. Some weigh 50 tons. Even the tumbled blocks from the sanctuary wall weigh a few tons each. Every stone you see was dragged here from quarries 10 miles away and stacked into walls and columns more than 50 feet high.
Of course, this isn't as impressive like the pyramids, right? But still, at the level of the craftsmanship and the manpower, the horsepower, whatever, the oxen power that was used to move these things is insane.
This video will explore how, with only the most basic technology, the Greeks and Romans built structures as colossal as the temple at Selinus. We'll focus on temples, for the simple reason that temples, with their huge columns and massive architraves, required heavier blocks than most other buildings. As a point of reference, let's start with the Parthenon. At about
the Nashville Parthenon. There's a Parthenon in Nashville, Tennessee.
100 feet wide by 230 feet long, the Parthenon was a very substantial building, the largest temple, in fact, to be constructed on the Greek mainland during the classical period. But
I really hope that when he's put like in parentheses Nashville, that's actually Tennessee. Otherwise, I feel stupid.
Parthenon was dwarfed by other temples. One of those giants stood a short distance from the Parthenon, where its ruins can still be seen. This was the temple of Olympian Zeus, which was, at 135 feet wide by 350 feet long, about the size of a football field.
Wow.
Its columns were almost twice as tall as the Parthenon's, and the gable of its pediment was as high as a 9-story building. Some temples were even larger, like the Temple of Apollo at Didyma, whose door was almost 50 feet tall, or the famous Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, which featured 127 60-foot columns. Thanks to the modular nature of temple design, the process of planning such buildings was straightforward. The hard part was quarrying thousands of tons of stone, bringing that stone to the construction site, and lifting it into place.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick look at the process. Most Greek temples were made of stone from local quarries. The Aegean Islands and
I love how there's like one almost ready.
Parts of mainland Greece had deposits of fine marble. Most other places had to cope with limestone and sandstone of varying quality. To reduce their weight, stones were shaped in the quarry. Channels were cut around them with iron picks, and metal wedges used to detach them from their beds. Stone, at the risk of blowing your mind, is heavy. Most stones, in fact, weigh about 2.5 tons per cubic yard.
2.5 tons, 1 ton obviously is 2,000 pounds. That's 5,000 pounds.
During the classical period, temples were often built with relatively small blocks and column drums, which could be moved by wagon. But colossal temples, and especially those built before about 500 BC, tended to use huge blocks that were too heavy for wheeled transport. Over short distances, sledges and rollers were sometimes used. The architect of the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus devised special wooden frames that allowed 25-ton blocks to be pulled along like gigantic rollers.
50,000 pounds!
Once stones reached the building site, they had to be set into place. At first, the usual method was to haul them up a dirt ramp. But around the end of the 6th century BC, cranes began to be used. An ancient crane was a system of compound pulleys, supported by a wooden frame. Ropes were looped around projections or carved channels in the blocks.
We don't give these individuals, even though they might not fully understand it, they understand the laws of motion without understanding what the laws of motion are, especially within physics. The physics knowledge, the pre-physics knowledge, is astounding.
As men at the crane's base turned a capstan, the ropes were tightened, and the stone began to rise. The Greeks already knew that multiplying pulleys made lifting easier, and seemed to have used cranes to good effect. The most sophisticated cranes, however, appeared later. The most famous
Whoa, that's huge.
colossal temple of the Roman era is probably the Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek, in what is now Lebanon. The columns of this temple are 65 feet high, and the peak of the roof was almost 150 feet above the courtyard where worshippers gathered.
It's insane that people were able to build this stuff so long ago with such precision.
The blocks of the architrave above the columns weigh up to 100 tons. There were temples in the city of Rome that were even larger. Unlike their Greek counterparts, the columns in Roman temples were often monolithic, made, that is, from a single piece of stone. Since these columns weighed anywhere from 50 to 100 tons, the Romans had to step up their
100 tons? 200,000 pounds.
crane game. Though they seem to have sometimes been larger, Roman cranes did not differ fundamentally from the Greek cranes in which they were based. We know of two basic models, one variety with 3 pulleys, and another variety with 5. However many pulleys a crane had, the Romans attached long spokes to the capstan for additional leverage. For exceptionally heavy loads, the capstan was replaced with a large tread wheel, turned
Yeah, that's what it shows right here, where people would use it.
by men walking inside.
Wow.
Building enormous temples, in short,
It's like playing Jenga right there.
was well within the technological capacity of the Greeks and Romans. The real challenge was financing the project. Like medieval cathedrals, huge temples could take centuries to build. Some cities simply ran out of money, leaving gigantic white elephants for future generations to cope with.
It's the same way with like temples. Most temples, religious temples, like most of them, right? It's the same way with future cathedrals in medieval times, like these huge cathedrals. Some of them are still unfinished to this day. People run around out of money. I mean, it's always the tangible, monetary. Always, I mean, I'm trying to find words, but it's always the thing. Not enough money.
The Temple of Hera at Samos, for example, was under construction for almost 800 years. And then,
I'm not
just
surprised.
as it was approaching completion, an earthquake knocked it down.
That's insane. Imagine all that progress 800 years later, and then earthquake comes.
One wonders if the people of Samos were relieved. Well, that's it. Short and sweet. Check out toldinstone.com for much more on...
That's insane. Let's get. I like that. Let's leave it right here. The Pantheon. Very. Not to be confused with the Parthenon. The Pantheon. Beautiful, beautiful little oil painting or whatever this is. Yeah. I mean, there's. Someone's probably done it, but like, obviously, you can look through some places and you can see geoliths, and then from geoliths you can start to see structure, and then structure you can start to see things like the pyramids and the Sphinx and the Parthenon and the crazy huge colossal Greek temples, eventually the Roman temples, and and then it kind of tapers off for a little bit. Then you have some resurgences here and there, like uh, in the Arab world, you have beautiful arches that are like I said, like you have to have a certain understanding of physics, mathematics, geometry. Even if you don't have like that modern standardization, you have some sort of like collective memory of those things that are used to make things symmetrical, to make things exact, precise. So insane. But it's not that insane. I mean, we always think that we're smarter than people were 2,000 years ago, and that's not the case. I mean, you can smartness comes really from cognitive ability, not from memory or whatnot. It really also comes through nutrition, early years, a lot of schooling and whatnot. But the cognitive problem solving ability of us apes, it is so it's pretty flat from what I've seen. You might, if you have a disagreement with that, let me know. I'd love to kind of converse with you on that. But I feel like it's been very flat over the last 2,000 years. It just depends on nurture at that point. But wow, amazing. Thank you guys for watching. Peace out. Bye bye.